Hello and welcome to this week's This is Media City. I'm Stephen Chapman and today I'm joined by Andy Miah, who's the Chair of Science, Communication and Future Technology at the University of Salford. I will be finding out what that means, but also we'll be talking about the amazing advancements in GenAI, ChatGPT, you name it, and the implications that's going to have on education, media, business and a lot more. We'll either love technology by the end of it or we might be throwing our computers away. Lots more to come. Professor Andy Miah, welcome to This is Media City podcast. Now I'm going to try and get your job title right. I'm going to have to look down because it's a long one, isn't it? Chair of Science, Communication and Future Media at the University of Salford.
That's correct, yeah, absolutely.
That's one that you presumably went to your careers advisor right at the start, said, I really want to get into this, guys.
Well, it was actually a time when University of Salford was really looking to build its public-facing programme. So this chair was trying to elevate that, but also think into the future, how we use technology across our entire portfolio. So that's why I came here, really.
Now, we've met at various events over there. I know you do so much stuff. So we're just going to have a chat about the many things that you're involved in, and either we will end this thinking that the technology in the future is brilliant, or I will be throwing this iPad across the thing and getting rid of all my social accounts, I think. We start every podcast with an icebreaker to find out a little bit about you as a person before we find out you as a professor. So pick a card, any card.
I'm going to go here.
Okay, let me know what it says.
No, it's not a magic trick. It's just
No, I'm not going to guess.
What do you do to relax? Question. Hobbies? Question.
Yeah.
Well, I do a lot of exercise. It's not really relaxing or a hobby.
Some people
More
find
something I hate, actually. So, yeah, I do triathlons, I do marathons, I do a lot of that sort of thing. But,
okay.
yeah, that's probably most of the time, actually, when I have free time. But getting up a hill, getting up a mountain, that then generally is my weekend.
Fair enough. Final one of the icebreakers before we get proper moving.
Vinyl or MP3? Flipping heck.
Well,
Are we still using MP3s?
I'm trying to work out. So vinyl or streaming? Are you a person that likes to feel it, or are you so tech? You glasses on, goggles on, everything.
I'd like to be that person that loves to feel it, but I am a Spotify user, and that is through and through. And what disappoints me, though, because I love how Spotify works, I love the kind of algorithm sort of science behind it, but my favourite go-to thing to listen to across the day is something that they think should be called sad instrumentals. But I think are just relaxing things that are good to have as background to work to. But yeah, I guess streaming's probably the way I go.
Sad instrumentals.
Sad instrumentals.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
there's someone there. Oh yeah, sad instrumentals guy.
I find them uplifting. It's good for me.
I do love going to a store and just touching, like Piccadilly Records, and you
Right.
see the someone's taken the time to write out about that vinyl and
and
stuff
I'm glad
like
that people like you exist. I would pay for that just to happen.
It's only because I think because my music taste is so varied, when it comes up with a playlist for me, it can be so mad that even I don't think, how's that come up? Insane. I don't know. Mine is definitely not sad instrumental anyway. Let's put it that way. Let's talk about you now as the professor of what you do. Now, I suppose the first question is, what exactly is the role of a chair of science, communication and future media? What does that actually mean?
Well, lots of people ask that question.
Thank goodness I'm not the only one.
Including my brother and sister. But the short answer is I spend a lot of time doing lots of varied things. Of course, I teach across biomedical, wildlife courses, I guest teach on public health. So I'm quite across the university, also teach on the art programs from time to time. But everything that I do is around emerging technologies. So I work on virtual reality, AI, work a lot with the Olympic Games on their media technology. So all this stuff that I do is trying to elevate how we use technology and hopefully do it for the greater good, but working through some of the challenges too. But I spend a lot of my time actually working with the Media City community as well on activities that we have here, but also trying to make things happen is, I guess, the short version of what I do.
So with the emerging technology and things like that, both in the Olympics and here, what does that entail? Is that looking at the future or looking at the now and how you can best use the now, or preparing for the future?
So a lot of my focus is looking at the future. So a lot of the work I do with companies is kind of horizon scanning work. What is the next generation of technology that they need to be looking at? So whether that's, I've advised companies like Nike, Adidas, companies that are trying to do big things, but also within the Olympic community, you have organizations like the World Health Organization, the United Nations, and again, across that sort of portfolio of 200 plus countries, everyone's at a very different level. So trying to see how each of them can work with technology to make sure they can advance what they're doing is, I guess, where I come in to try to guide, advise, but also give them a bit of a sense of where we are right now. I think one of the key things I'm always reminded of, it was for Sir Tim Berners-Lee, when he came up with the Manifesto for the World Wide Web, ended it by saying, this is for everyone. And I always think of that because so much of what's here now really isn't still for everyone. There's so much work just to tell people what's out there, what they can use, much of which is free. And that's like a full-time job in itself, I think.
I was going to say, the internet given away for free was one of the greatest things to happen, I would say. But what is happening now is so fast. How are you keeping up with that? And also, from a moral and ethical standpoint, how does one keep up with that?
Well, I've always been passionate about information sharing. So I remember when I was doing a PhD, one of my professors told me that the average academic article is read by 6 people,
Okay.
which wasn't very inspiring at the time.
You must have felt so good about yourself at that.
So I started building websites around kind of the turn of the millennium and used that as a way of getting ideas out there. And through that, met lots of people, but also became very passionate about how our information world was changing and the beginnings of the internet. I remember going to the Sydney Olympic Games as a student, actually, just to do some studying. And I managed to get accredited as media because I had a website. And back then, this was the second Olympic Games to have a website. It was a big deal to be publishing, and it felt very empowering. It felt like you could take ownership and have power by just being out there publishing stuff. And that continues. I still think that you kind of have to understand the shifts in how the media world's operating to make sense of it, but also to make sure you don't kind of end up at one of those people when you're 80 years old not knowing how to use a television remote control, if TVs are still here by then, of course.
Of course. Already your first positive comment towards the Media City people watching there.
Well, that's sort of the myth, I think. TV is a fascinating area because so much, you look at TikTok, so much content on TikTok is from broadcasters, major broadcasters, and often kind of clipping content that's then put out there to build awareness, build attraction to the content. I think that the myth is that we're kind of post-TV, but it's just evolving, I think.
I think we spoke to Heidi, head of Salford and head of 5 Live, and we also spoke to Jason, who's the business development guy at ITV. They were both saying how Netflix and the streamers are changing to emulate kind of the ITVs and BBCs, as well as BBCs going. They're all learning a lot from each other. I think as much as people say we're on a platform and we're not bothered about the live anymore, Netflix and the others are starting to think, oh, actually these live events are quite a big old deal for people, aren't they?
They are, and I think that you've got to think the long game here and understand some of the shifts that are taking place. I think it's really great that BBC really leaned into Verify, because actually in a world where so much is AI generated, it's really hard to know where to trust information. That problem's becoming even greater, I think, in our present time. So organisations like the BBC, people that are investing into credible, verifiable information, I think are the ones we will stay with in the long term. And I think that's something that we definitely need to keep an eye on over the next few years.
You brought it up there with BBC Verify. Are we at a danger here with the internet and with ChatGPT and all these things that we're legislating after the horse has bolted? I think there's a mixed metaphor in there. We're so keen to push the latest technology that it's almost out there before we know how on earth we're going to deal with it. I know we're in a world, we've always been a world where there's right-leaning newspapers and left-leaning newspapers, but now we're at a stage where you could hold your whole life just right-leaning or left-leaning. Are we in danger of this getting a lot worse?
I think certainly we are in a bit of a wild west in terms of how people make sense of information out there. I mean, just the journey that people take to discover things is radically different today, even to what it was 10 years ago. The way in which content's bundled into platforms without people even seeing how that works, I think is also becoming much harder for people to orientate themselves. So certainly I think it's a much more challenging time. My job, which I started 10 years ago at Salford University, has become infinitely harder because of this. You know, you thought that you had a sense of where you would communicate your work, your ideas, your research, but it's now far harder, and the expectations of people are far higher as well. You've got to be much more effective at delivering content to people for them to even bother staying with your 8-second video. So it's a tough situation to be in, and that's where I think earlier in the year the UK government put together a call for really kind of responses to a call for evidence about AI, and it was one of the most responded to calls, 11,000 responses. And I think media literacy and AI literacy is at the top of our agenda, both as educators, but also I think as society. It's so critical, it's really hard. I mean, the latest AI models, they're just so lifelike that I think, especially if you take into account that people are sort of scrolling through content on a mobile device, it's really hard to tell what's real and what's not. So we have to take sort of ownership of that problem and really help people figure it out. It's it's tough times.
We're in danger of getting a long way past people sharing made up Twitter, BBC headline JPEGs to seeing real people that they think are real doing things that they haven't actually done.
Yeah.
We're heading very quickly towards that, and once it's out there, then how is that celebrity or whoever going to come back from that?
Absolutely. I mean, there is an assault on reality taking place right now. And it's even more pernicious than that. I think that the use of AI to generate materials that are originating from the original, if you like, the authentic voice, but actually are AI generated entirely, is becoming a business model for content creation. I mean, we've seen little bits of this, glimpses in the last few years, the beginnings of AI news anchors. I think Korea in 2019, there was the first one that was used. And we've seen now a range of uses of this. Even though I did a lot of work at the Olympic Games, and we've had AI reporters report the live sports as they happen. So these are becoming part of the business model of the industry. And that makes it even more complicated, because then some of that stuff you kind of worry about and think is awful, but now it's becoming part of the actual economy of making content at all. And then it's, how do we feel about this now? And I think some aspects of this are really difficult to wrangle, but actually some of them are really productive and really effective at delivering great content.
You're an educator. Is this a thing that we are going to have to look at from even primary school and secondary school age of you cannot trust everything you see? I don't want to put all blame on teachers or push on teachers, but I don't think necessarily parents will understand. But is there something we have to start thinking about as what is real and what isn't?
I think, frankly, we've lost 20 years of doing that. We should have been doing this 20 years ago. My son's 15 years old. He's gone through his entire education with next to no literacy content about digital at all. Every couple of years, a letter home with a kind of posters talking about online harms. That's basically it. So I think that as a society, we have, in the round, failed to provide digital literacy across the education spectrum, from primary all the way up to university. And I see that, in lots of different ways. University students that enter without much knowledge of AI, a sense in which using it's cheating, but actually what we need to be doing is empowering young people with digital very early on in their lives, not just to be aware of the risks, but also to make the most of this remarkable technology. 2 years ago, the United Nations Global Education Monitoring Report discovered that a quarter of the world's schools are banning mobile phones. That's now up to about 33%. So there's an actual tidal wave against tech that we see emerging. And I think it's such a tragic situation. I understand it, but it's a tragic situation. These remarkably powerful computers are seen as a source of a kind of frustration, pain, and trauma, not just for the kids, but the teachers too, that we're in this situation.
And you talk about university essays and things like that. The idea, and as a journalist, I see reporting done based on AI or and putting things in ChatGPT, which is absolutely made up. and even journalists aren't going back and going, maybe I should have checked that. And we're supposed to be the ones that fact check. So that is a danger, isn't it? It
is a danger. And I think that there is a massive transformation to human behaviour that's operating around this technology. And a lot of it is leading to huge misunderstandings. I mean, lots of things, frankly, the hallucinations of AI, we see many of them on a day-to-day basis. But being able to detect them is nigh impossible, I think, for most people, unless you go outside of the platforms. So I think that's something that's critical, is to help people see what is verifiable and what they need to do to make sure they can feel confident in what they're discovering. And this is, I think, all levels of education need to take this seriously. It's something that does need to be in there from, I think, the beginning right up to the end, but also beyond too, because of course, as you said at the start, it's such a fast-paced world. There's no point at which we are all media literate and can figure everything out and we're up and running. It's just continual work.
Before you throw your phone against the wall, we've done the bad stuff. Surely there is a lot that tech has changed for the positive here, and a lot that GenAI and ChatGPT and all these things are positive, and I imagine that's what you're talking to the Olympic Games and educators about.
Yeah, and I guess, I'm in this world because I believe in it. I think that actually, going back to Sir Tim Berners-Lee quote, I think that still resonates. It is for everyone. It is incredibly empowering. The fact that a big medical funding organisation like the Wellcome Trust can have its own channels of communication rather than just rely on the BBC science shows to get stuff out there is profoundly empowering and actually brings so much more insight and information to people. It's a wonderful situation. I think that it's always been challenging to make sure we figure out who's actually accessing the news and information and who's not, and being vigilant about that. But I'm also really moved by how remarkable and creative people are with making content on social media. I teach social media in my courses and advocate students get on board with doing it very early on, if only because I think when you switch the sort of behavior from scrolling to creating, you have a very different journey through it. You have a more critical journey through it, you have a more enjoyable journey through it, and all those things I think are fantastic for personal development. So social media for me is fantastic and something that I think all people should think about trying to do well. And ChatGPT is a bit like that. You think about what you do with ChatGPT, you're basically trying to ask good questions to get kind of insightful responses. It's basically what Plato and Socrates did in ancient Greece, asking difficult questions and trying to figure them out is what prompts really are. And if you can do that well, you can get great answers. If you can't, you get bad answers.
I will think of that when I next ask ChatGPT. I'm like Plato.
Well, you can ask ChatGPT to respond like Plato as well, which is even better.
Obviously, one of the key worries, I know in the media at the moment, but across every sector, is how much this is going to change our world. Are we going to, if you can make films by putting in prompts, what's the point in having a camera operator, an editor, a script writer? And do you feel that the human is always going to be centre of this? It's just a different job title, maybe?
I think with creative practice, it's really interesting to look at the kind of history of how that develops and what it is that leads people down one kind of rabbit hole of creativity over another. And of course, we can look back and see how much that's changed, but also certain things that remain so valuable to us, even though they might be technologically out of date. People still illustrate, even though we have cameras to take photographs. I think that we've always had a kind of history of experimenting with new forms of creativity. I'm really optimistic that that's also the case with AI. It will push the boundaries of what is possible creatively, and it will absolutely, and is, disrupting the industry massively in ways that will lead to job losses, and are already, but it will push us to think differently about what we value creatively. And I think that it's really hard to kind of foresee how that ends up. I'm optimistic that it will end up that we still value art, we still value creativity. I'm optimistic that more people will discover their own creative journey than ever before. So I think that's one of the things that I think we haven't done well historically. We have taught people in schools that art is a certain thing, but actually it's a fraction of what creativity can be. So I think that we have to manage transitions of the sectors and the subsectors to figure out how people can stay afloat in these very difficult times. But increasingly, the integration of the technology is a bigger part of that future. And it's coming to terms with it very quickly that I think is important.
One of your roles is looking at the ethics of all of this. Looking at where these things have sourced their material from, do you think we're beyond the legal issues here, or do you think there could be another wave of people saying, well, hold on a minute, that's from that film or that's from that book? Or
it reminds me a bit about a year ago, people were starting to use ChatGPT a lot and would be really polite to ChatGPT. Good morning, ChatGPT, how are you today? That sort of thing.
And it was wasting billions of pounds.
It was discovered this cost a lot of money to do that. But people thought, well, how should we feel about that? It's an odd thing, isn't it, to kind of be polite to a computer? For me, this is one of those kind of primitive questions that in a few years' time, if not sooner, will just become completely irrelevant. And I'm already at the point where I haven't got time for please and thank you. Just a garbled. Actually, I did this with a lecture a few months ago. I was at a lecture, a renowned physicist talking about Oppenheimer and his sort of trajectory, and I took notes during this lecture, and made really scrappy notes on my mobile phone, not comprehensible even to me, frankly. I then put them into Notebook LN, the Google product, and it whipped them into a 2-person podcast with additional context, a fantastic summary of the whole thing, and it was remarkable. So I think the behaviours that we see around technology are going to change so dramatically over the next few years that I think trying to imagine what they will be based on how we're using them now is really short-sighted. I'll give you one quick example of where I think that's critical. The integration of memory into AI and the beginnings of companionship with AI are the sort of glimpses into how that relationship will change. Very soon, your AI will know more about you than anyone in your life, and you'll feel closer to it as well. You'll tell things to AI that you won't tell to other people. And this relationship, as kind of weird and strange as it may seem to imagine, will just become a normal part of our day-to-day lives. The memory that it builds into it not only will be useful to us, but will also help us remember stuff we've done in the past much more effectively too. So I think that everything we're imagining AI to be is likely to change.
That's kind of scary, but I'm also thinking like from Alzheimer's and stuff like that. There's elements that can be very positive, but going backwards, all of these have been learnt on something, whether it's Reddit posts or books or films. If those permissions haven't been given, do you think the publishers, the studios, are kind of start pushing back a little bit when, say, a Gen AI film comes out and you can clearly tell it's got Disney or Star Wars or something in it?
That's a great question, because how we identify the origin of an influence is a deeply contested thing. It's like certain things we can sort of identify. If a certain loop is taken out of a song and put into another, you can kind of see, and of course we have a legal precedent for figuring that stuff out. I think aspects of that become even harder when you have multiple, you're kind of putting a bunch of things in a bag, jumbling them up, and then pulling out something new. I think that sort of problem is very different, where it becomes increasingly difficult to identify that origin. And again, I think where we are at the moment is this sort of period of time where we're still in the old model, trying to figure out what the new model looks like, and everything's a bit jumbled up. But I think that will change dramatically. We are already at a point where many people have, in fact, through research, shown that they prefer AI-generated songs over human-generated songs.
That's a scary thing.
It's a scary thing, but then I guess I also think to myself, well, what do we think of as songs really anyway? You know, the 3.5-minute song that's made it through the charts over the last sort of 60 years or so was time bound to that amount, because that's how much you could fit onto a cylinder back when we started recording. So there's always been kind of technological constraints that have limited creativity. I think certainly where we are at the moment, we still have many of our, I guess, biggest players in the industry, the most economically important players, I guess, are those that have that ability to say, well, actually stop, we want to make sure everyone gets paid. But that won't be a model that lasts very long. I think the creative transformation that's taking place will give birth to a very new model. And what that looks like is hard to call.
How does that impact on businesses? Because businesses who are trying to keep on top of technology, they are constantly having to look at the next big, and they could back the wrong horse very quickly. And I suppose that's what your role is it? Just to kind of, because the bigger the business, the bigger the income they have, input they have to put into the new technology.
I think that's the right way to look at it. Certainly, I would say that my kind of core advice for businesses is to try to put both feet into this world to understand the possibilities.
Not even dip a toe.
Not
both
even
feet.
dip a toe, jump straight, because actually the pace of change is so fast that dipping a toe just won't allow you to move swiftly enough even to identify the use cases that AI might provide for you. And we sort of think about what it is that we imagine being the kind of human in the loop with this kind of new technology. But very few industries go far enough to think about, well, where is that human in the loop? What is our unique role? What can we contribute? What can it do for us that will allow us to be more effective? And I think that it's hopeful that there will be more jobs created by AI than will be lost, but there'll be different jobs. And so if you want to manage the transition and make sure people feel valued as part of that process, you need to empower staff to have that journey themselves. It's not just how can you bring AI into your role, it's how can you bring AI into your life. And that is a challenging situation for many companies, because historically, IT's been this thing that we kind of add on to the job and other people do it. But yeah, IT is everything today. You have to figure this out across an institution, not just get your IT. I mean, I don't remember the last time I had anyone come and do any IT support for me in the university. It's like everything's pretty much autonomous now. And increasingly, you kind of have to be able to do that really well to be effective in what you do. And that's, I've got researchers that are doing work with AI in conservation and law. It's just across everything. So the best thing you can do, I think, to protect your future in your role is to understand the technology and keep that agility in what you do.
I suppose it's like it's not really like it, but the industrial revolution kind of thing, that you need to have the buy-in from the lowest starter of your business to get it all the way through to the CEO, because otherwise they'll start thinking, well, my job's not going to be here. What's the point of me doing this?
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that certainly you do need it across all levels of an organisation. Leadership need to understand it. And in fact, leadership are critical to understand it, because if they can't see the potential and don't understand how it works, it's not like just not knowing how to make a PowerPoint presentation. It's knowing how to future-proof your entire company. And if you're not doing it, another is. And that's where I think we see what's really interesting. In the Olympic Games, where I work quite a lot of the time, they have identified 880 use cases in the Olympic Games for AI, and beginning that journey of trying to integrate it into so much of what they do, from doing interesting projects like colorizing archival footage using AI from many years ago, to trying to use AI in broadcasting to archive, catalog, and also then provide more bespoke packages for broadcasters to then hopefully optimize their sales, hopefully optimize the impact of the content, but also to create a much more compelling archive of this remarkable event that's just too big for everyone to digest during the 17 days of competition.
And the amount of cameras and the amount of resource that's just coming through, having AI say, right, well, that's a wide shot runner, it would be, I suppose, is immense.
And that's been a change in journey certainly as well. When the Beijing Olympics took place in 2008, the Olympic Committee was still in the process of telling people to cease and desist putting images on Flickr, because it was compromising their IP. And now it's at a point where they want more of that. So trying to find a way to integrate some of these transformations into the business model is already, I think, part of that world. The Olympics is quite a traditional organisation. And yet, I think recently I've seen they've got AI that's turning a diver into an elephant jumping off the diving board into the pool. And the Olympic rings are there. This protected brand is there. It's all part of the new ethos of trying to, I guess, do media differently. And there's a fascination for this that I think is certainly appealing to audiences, but particularly appealing, I think this is one big part of what we've seen over the last 20 years, is that people can make stuff as well, right? That's what's really exciting. You can make this stuff yourself. Yes, there's still a place for broadcast, high quality technology within elite events like that, and high quality film and TV, but there's also the capacity to create your own stuff. And that's a really empowering thing to do, to feel part of something. And that's, I think we've learned a lot from the social media era through that, but AI is taking it to a next level.
Slightly extending that, but staying with the sport, you do a lot with esports as well, don't you? I've met you at esports event and things like that. Do you think esports is going to come into the Olympics a bit more?
So we've had about 10 years of trying to figure out what to do with esports in the Olympic
Games. Because there isn't actually an Olympic. It's not like the big esports games don't automatically match like running, high jump, swimming.
No. And actually the first computer games title was from the 1984 LA Games, and it was the sort of game that'd be like Daley Thompson's Decathlon, keyboards. And those games, fun enough, they kind of still exist. You still have every games. You have the next computer game of the Olympics, and they're all quite similar still. But over the last nearly 10 years now, the Olympics has gone on a journey to try to figure out how to feel about esports, and started off feeling that this is the antithesis to physical activity, like all these kids on games, they should be out playing football sort of thing, to now realising that gaming is part of many young people's lives, and they need to find a way to reach into the community and be part of it to service the next generation. So in 2027, we have the first Olympic esports games, which will be its own event, distinct from the Olympic Games, but under the Olympic umbrella. And that's really where we're up to with that relationship. There's also a lot of people that work across the esports world that come out of that traditional sports world as well, either setting up their own teams or own events. So there is a huge amount of integration that has taken place. And I think also, even last year, 2 years ago, we had the first Olympic esports week, where we managed to get Fortnite into the program, which historically, again, Fortnite, a shooter game, wasn't terribly appealing to the Olympic world, which is very concerned about these sorts of things, but it was a kind of target-based shooting experience, and that was a huge step forwards in each of those worlds understanding one another, because it's not just the sports world trying to figure out gaming, it's the gaming world trying to figure out sports. And I think we're at a positive place with that now, but I think there's still more to come. We're still beginnings of the active esports era. We've seen some great sort of mixed reality taekwondo demonstrations. There's a fantastic table tennis. In fact, table tennis has its own international VR table tennis tour that's under the direction of the International Table Tennis Federation. So many sports are starting to think about, well, what could our arena experience look like in a mixed reality world? And I think we'll see a lot more of that to come.
I mean, Formula One part of their training is esports, I suppose, isn't it?
It's huge. I mean, and sim racing is just off the charts, massive worldwide. And of course, the additional compelling aspect of it is that, you can train as a sim racer and then actually drive the car probably better than others too. So these are becoming increasingly intertwined, I think.
We've covered quite a few bits, but I'm going to go back to education here because one of our partners is the University of Salford. So let's talk about them. Sorry, University of Salford, I'm going to ask a question which will worry you. What is the future of university? Because in theory, you could gamify education. You don't necessarily need the buildings. You've got ChatGPT really ruining your marking system. What's going to happen next?
Well, that's a big question. In fact, I had my first tutorial of the year this morning and talked about that with students today. And I think for me, universities are remarkable places that are in the business of breaking new ground. That's how we distinguish ourselves from other educational levels. So the lecturers, the professors, what they're doing at university is both teaching but also researching and trying to break new ground through that research. I've always felt passionately that one of the big sort of failings of universities, that so much of what happens in them gets locked within the kind of paywall of the institution. The labour that students put into their assessments, all that stuff stays within the system. And yet we have 27,000 students at the University of Salford, and so much of what they could do could be out there in the world, shaping it, changing the conversation. And I think a lot of what we're trying to do is to build graduates that feel confident to do that, to feel that they have a contribution to make, that they don't have to wait till they graduate to get a job, that they hit the ground running and start to contribute early in the safe environment of scholars who are giving them insights into both the kind of cutting edge of where we're up to with whatever subject it might be, but also giving them a sense of what it could become as well. Whether that is trying to think about how do you transform an e-sport into a mixed reality or virtual reality experience using new technologies, and what kind of questions do we have about that, to even, of course, doing the sorts of things we do in biomedical, like all the research endeavours that we have around new vaccines. All this stuff comes out of the university sector. So I think that we have to kind of remind people that what universities do is break new ground in our knowledge economy. And that's the core of what motivates us also as teachers. But I think bringing students on that journey as well is a really critical part of that. Getting them much more public facing, seeing that what they contribute matters and that what they have access to is really exceptional. So I obviously a bit biased in thinking we still have a future, but I guess I think that the wider question we need to ask is, where are the safe spaces where we can have critical, open debates without fear of violence, for fear of getting in trouble, fear of being wrong. And that's, I think, a big part of what universities offer people. So I hope that it remains that way, because actually finding safe spaces to explore complicated ideas is so central to what we need to be doing.
And and parents don't listen to this bit. When I was at university, most of my learning was not in lectures, because I did French and German. I didn't really turn up. It was the socialising. It was the being in Manchester.
Yeah.
It was all of that. Is there a danger the more we introduce technology, the easier it is to put on your headset and tune in from home, and you miss what is one of the biggest, I've always felt, positives of university, that you're with like-minded people or non-like-minded people from across all. And you're kind of getting together and you become yourself. You realise is there a danger that technology removes that social interaction?
I think there is a danger. We're a world away from people putting on a headset at home and tuning into a lecture. And that, I think, is really tragic, because the technology is here. So actually most of the stuff we've done digitally has been quite pedestrian, I would say. Teams calls, Zoom calls, that sort of thing. It's still quite flat as a technological experience. I do think it's worthwhile thinking about that much more creatively and asking what it could become if we did it differently. How could we create a really remarkable digital learning experience that is mind-blowing. And I remember back in 2013 taking around Google Glass around the world.
Yeah.
And that was the sort of tech where you put it on people and they were blown away. They felt like they could see the future and had a glimpse into a different way of interacting with technology. And I think that our experiences with tech should be a bit like that. The reality of many students' lives these days is that many of them have significant paid part-time work. They have limitations that restrict their ability to be on campus a lot. And I think we have to work harder to bring them on for exciting things that happen. So whether it's being part of festival experiences or having student events where they come together for something that's a kind of celebration. These are, I think, what campus life is becoming. And having those moments where you come together not just for the teaching, but for something else is a bigger part of its future. You see around the UK as well, universities trying to rethink their role in their community. And I think that's another big part of it as well, because so many people around us don't come onto our campus. And I think changing that is not just valuable for the community, it's also really valuable for us. I think at Salford we do a reasonable job of that, but it's partly because so many of us are embedded into the community as well, so it's part of our DNA.
And do you think young people in the future are going to be embracing the technology, or do you think there's going to be a pushback? Because I know the brick phones are getting a comeback.
Yeah.
We spoke about vinyl at the start. There's younger people who are buying the vinyl. I sadly can't include myself in the younger people bit. But do you think there is going to be a push towards that, or do you think we're on this roller coaster now?
Well, I think the mistake we make is to think about a pen and paper as not technology, right? So I think there's a really interesting study, and there are lots of studies that come out like this. There was one recently about ChatGPT and the fact that people that use ChatGPT rather than go out and search for information don't get as much of an educational experience. But of course, there are bad ways to use ChatGPT and there are good ways to use it. And similarly, this other study that looked at whether people that handwrite with a pen are getting a more effective learning journey than those that type. But the comparison was between people that handwrite with a pen versus those that type with one finger. Now, if you type with one finger, you're not going to have an optimal learning experience, I think.
No.
So I think you have to kind of look at the detail of these things and understand what learning journey somebody's on. And I think the biggest worry for me is that actually people don't learn early enough how to use these things critically and effectively. So you kind of get stuck into a one finger typing experience too soon and lose really the possibility that this technology can bring. So a lot of my day-to-day is trying to show people, look, this is what's achievable now. Not only can you type to ChatGPT, you can talk to it using audio and you can ask it to modify its responses to help you understand things. So we have within this technology remarkably bespoke, personalized tuition. And yet most people aren't discovering that yet. And I think that's so much of what we need to do is to show people the possibilities so they can get the most out of it.
We're still at the searching with Yahoo when the internet started, aren't we?
We are, yes, I think so, sadly.
Final question here is probably the $1 billion question. We're sitting here in the podcast studio, in the content studio here. What do you see this space looking like in the future?
Well, I started at Salford University in 2014. And one of my first events was here on the Media City campus as part of Manchester Science Festival. And I chaired an event wearing my Google Glass. We had this really interesting film at the end of it. But through that relationship with the campus here, I got to know so much of what we have here in Media City. And I suppose all of those experiences have led me to believe that what we have here is not only unique, but it's remarkably powerful as an entity, both as a kind of creative, technological, geographic space, but also because you have lots of people pushing the boundaries and lots of ambitious people trying to see what is the next iteration of the future of media. So I see lots of new companies coming in, lots of new people thinking differently about things. And I think that's what's really attractive about it, is we have a unique configuration of organizations here that are allowing us to think differently about the future of media. And what I've noticed over the 10 years is that people recognize that. People understand that things are different here. And you come to Media City to get to know those organizations, to see how they're working, but also to be part of that community. So I think it's what always draws me back to the place, but also I feel very proud that as a university we have a building, a campus here that allows us to be part of that. Because for me, it's not about locating institutions in separate places. We want our educational work to happen alongside industry, to be part of that cutting edge and feel that we can build things together in ways that people have yet to imagine, I think.
Fabulous. Honestly, I've skirted the surface here, haven't I, really? But I haven't thrown my iPad away yet.
No,
so,
that's
so,
good news.
so there must be some positives in there. I just think I need to ask questions better to ChatGPT.
That sounds like a good plan. Yes,
Thank you ever so much for coming on to This Is Media City, and I'm sure we'll speak about more exciting stuff soon.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for watching and listening to This Is Media City, which is a 39 Pictures production on behalf of Media City and in partnership with the University of Salford. And all the team helping make this happen are all graduates and undergraduates of the university. So remember to please like, subscribe, comment and share, and we will see you next week. The production team are Meg Bond, Tegan Easton, Akila Hewitt and James Young.